Hey guys, there are going to be some baby noises possibly in this video. Not even possibly, absolutely there will be some baby noises in this video. Like that. I don't know what to tell you, just deal with it. It's cute, right? It's fun. If you don't like kids, it's not cute, it's really obnoxious. I understand that, but that's what we're dealing with. So I wanted to talk about some ways that I think a lot of vegans, including vegan YouTubers, some problems in terms of nutrition and ways that I think that they make veganism harder by promoting certain things or demonizing certain things. I've talked about many times on this channel that vegan, when done right, is perfectly safe. It is a healthy way to eat. And again, I've talked about, dietetic organizations like the US's Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics agreeing with that vegan can be done for all life stages healthfully as long as it is done healthfully, right? As long as it is balanced and includes certain supplementation, namely B12, very likely calcium, and very likely vitamin D. But again, many vegan activists, promoters, educators, whatever you want to call them, are promoting recommendations that are not recommended by these organizations. And this isn't good because, again, I think it makes veganism harder. These recommendations by various YouTubers and bloggers, vegan, activists, are not good. They're not evidence-based, whereas the recommendations by dietetic organizations generally are. And also, I think it makes veganism look really silly. When you are promoting something that everyone else knows is not true and is really ridiculous, it unfortunately reflects badly on veganism on the whole, or at least potentially does. I'm sure a lot of people will just say, okay, that's that one person's interpretation of a vegan diet. But again, a lot of people, they don't like veganism. They don't like the idea of having to give up foods that they love, cheeseburgers and whatever else. So they're kind of looking for these types of things. They're looking for vegans promoting fringe diets and saying, aha, see, veganism is inherently unhealthy. Anyway, that was way too long of an intro. Let's get to the things, the list. So number one, demonizing and discouraging supplements. So I'm not talking about people who want to eat as whole of a vegan diet as possible. There are plenty of people like that who will say, of course we need to supplement for B12, but everything else, they want to get, vitamin D from sunshine, and they want to get calcium from leafy greens. They want to meet all of the rest of their needs just from food. And that's perfectly fine. You can absolutely do that. Possibly not for DHA. That's not a clear-cut issue. I have a whole video on DHA if you're interested. But for everything else aside from B12, you can absolutely do that. I think there's a good argument to be made for not doing that when it comes to vitamin D. In other words, it's a better idea to get vitamin D from supplements because skin damage and DNA damage and cancer, right? And obviously if you have darker skin, that can be really, really difficult to meet your vitamin D needs from the sun. But yeah, if you want to do all of that stuff, that's perfectly fine. The problem is when people are, again, demonizing supplementation and saying that this is unhealthy, particularly when it comes to B12. Fortunately, we don't see that nearly as much anymore. All of the kind of supernatural raw food kind of vegans have, for the most part, fallen by the wayside, I think, but there are still some. A good example would be Fully Raw Christina's recent video where she recommended really bad advice when it comes to B12, that you should just wait to get tested and essentially wait for symptoms before taking a B12 supplement, which is absolutely not recommended by anyone. We are not getting B12 on vegan diet, raw vegan, whatever, any sort of vegan diet where you are not eating animal products. You are not getting enough B12. You absolutely have to supplement. And again, I already talked about vitamin D being very, very useful. A lot of us spend a lot of time indoors. And again, unless you're very, very careful about how you spend time outdoors, someone like me who has pretty fair skin, I don't need that much time in the sun. Now, I do need enough of my skin exposed, right? You don't want to go outside and just get sun on your face. It's the worst place to get sun anyway. Ideally, you want it around your core and your legs and whatnot. But, if it's noonday sun, I would only spend maybe 10 minutes out there at a time, right? But you do need to do that regularly. So every day. And again, if you have darker skin, you're going to have to spend way more time, potentially hours out in the sun, which is just not feasible for a lot of people. And again, any sun exposure is skin damage, right? It's not just, number one, you don't want to tan. It's not good for you. And of course you don't want to burn. But even if you're just spending minutes out in the sun without sunscreen, that is still putting you at risk for cancer. It's a much, much lower risk than someone who is regularly tanning and regularly burning, but there's still risk there. There's also the issue of wrinkles, right? I mean, I kick myself for all of the time I spent in the sun and all of the time I spent tanning in my teens and my early 20s. Like, I already have crow's feet here when I smile. It's like, I can't do anything about that. And you know, like women and men, we don't really want wrinkles. So again, if you can avoid that just by taking a supplement most of the time, right, and limiting your sun exposure, I think a lot of us would prefer that. And then there's also the issue of where you're located. For many of us, for many months out of the year, we simply don't get enough UV radiation to produce enough vitamin D. So for many of us, a vitamin D supplement is easier and safer and just more effective. Calcium is another one. I talked about this one in this video pretty extensively, but basically, you know, again, you can meet your calcium needs from a whole food diet, absolutely. But it is easier, I think, for a lot of us to at least get some of it from supplements. So either taking a calcium supplement or drinking a non-dairy milk, a soy milk or almond milk or cashew milk that's fortified with calcium, also calcium set tofu. Because otherwise, if you're eating whole foods, you do have to eat at least some of like specific cooked greens like collard greens. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to eat collard greens every day. It's not really my thing. DHA may also be useful. Again, I have a video on that. And a multi too. It's certainly not necessary, but it can be an easy way to get, you know, if you don't need a perfect diet, like I don't need a perfect diet. So I like to take a multi. Right now I just take basically one every other day. So I essentially take half of one every day since I'm not pregnant, I'm not breastfeeding or anything. And I mostly eat pretty healthy. I just need a little bit more of certain things. Like I tend, when I put my stuff into Chronometer, I tend to be a little bit low in like vitamin E because I don't eat lots of sunflower seeds and stuff. Point is, I'm not perfect and I don't meet all of my needs on a regular basis. So I like to just take a multi every other day. And again, it contains, you know, B12 and vitamin D as well. So again, it's totally fine if someone wants to get all of their calcium from plants and all of their vitamin D from sunshine. But to demonize supplementation and to make it seem like it's unhealthy to meet your needs, you know, for calcium, vitamin D, whatever, from supplementation, as some vegans do, is just totally unwarranted and I think makes veganism harder. I don't think many people would be super jazzed about having to eat collard greens every day or having to spend their lunch break sunbathing. So that was number one, and that took way too long. This is why I just have notes here. When I just take notes instead of actually having a script, like if I just do bullet points, I just ramble, and videos are even longer than when I script it. So, oh, that's just adorable. Okay, so number two is fearmongering over oil and fat. I have a video that I just put out. Oh gosh, maybe not just, maybe it was like a month ago now, but a video on oil responding to Mike the Vegan's video on oil. That's a pretty good example of that. And unfortunately, it's not just oil. Many vegans who, you know, promote low fat, high carb, they also recommend limiting whole food fats as well. Avocados, nuts, and seeds. The recent What the Health documentary is a pretty good example of that. This is a shame because healthy plant fats, including oils, certain oils like canola and olive oil, they're good for us. They help to lower our LDL and they make food tastier. Again, I don't think many people are going to be very interested in eating very low fat diets. It's just not as palatable. So number three is demonizing protein. So it's one thing to say that it's easy to get enough protein on a vegan diet. It's another thing to say that all you have to do to get enough protein is to eat enough calories, or even that getting too much protein or eating a protein-rich diet is bad for you. As I've talked about before, a balanced vegan diet that contains lysine-rich plants like beans can easily provide enough protein. But there are a lot of vegans promoting, as I already said, a low-fat, high-carb vegan diet, which tends to be a low-protein diet as well. If most of your foods are potatoes and rice and fruit, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to get enough protein, particularly the essential amino acid, lysine. As far as the claim that lots of protein is unhealthy, it really depends on the source. If most of your protein is coming from beef, yeah, you should probably change that. But if it's coming from like tofu, you know, beans and nuts and whatnot, healthy plant foods, there's no indication that too much, that getting a lot of protein is bad for you. If anything, eating more protein on a vegan diet likely puts us at an advantage because protein is the most satiating of the 3 macronutrients, and protein-rich foods like beans and nuts tend to be really good sources of nutrients that vegans can easily lack, like zinc and iron and calcium. Plus, most people are used to eating lots of protein. Telling someone that they should go from eating meat and potatoes to just potatoes or potatoes and vegetables, it's probably not that appealing. So number 4, fear-mongering over salt. So this is one that has some connection to reality. Although recent epidemiological research has found that eating low sodium for healthy people probably isn't necessary, the current consensus is still that everyone should eat a low sodium diet. Reducing salt intake is a reasonable recommendation, but unfortunately some vegans take it to the extreme and say that we shouldn't eat any salt. The no SOS or SOS free movement, which is no salt, no sugar, no oil, is pretty popular among vegan YouTubers. Not only does this put people at risk for iodine deficiency, but it also makes food, like, a lot less delicious. Admittedly, this is the point of these type of diets, like SOS free or no SOS. It's no sugar, no oil, no salt. It's to make food less palatable so that it's less super intriguing so that you don't eat as much. But do we really need more less palatable food representing veganism? Like, do we really need more food that tastes like cardboard? And I don't think that making people afraid of adding a little bit of salt to their food, like to their vegetables, so they'll actually eat them, I don't think that's a good idea. The only highly palatable food that you really find in like a whole food plant-based diet that doesn't include salt is fruit, like whole fruit. And so an SOS-free diet is likely to lead people to eat a high fruit diet. While some fruit is obviously good for us and a lot of us don't eat enough of it, a fruit-predominated diet is not ideal. It's likely going to be a diet low in protein and low in various minerals. So number 5, demonizing artificial sweeteners. So this one is, I would say, pretty much universal among like vegan promoters. And I think that's a shame. Look, refined sugar is bad for you. It's not controversial to say that. Like trans fat, it's pretty much like universally agreed upon that sugar is really unhealthy, that we should be consuming as little refined sugar as possible. And anything that can help us do that, anything that can help us reduce our sugar consumption, so artificial sweeteners, is probably a step in the right direction. Sucralose, aspartame, these can help, and there's no evidence that they're dangerous. Substituting a tablespoon of sugar with a tablespoon of Splenda or whatever, like in your coffee, whatever you're eating, it can really help. It just means that you have more calories now to use for healthy foods that have actual micronutrients. And then the last one would be advocating raw. This is like the B12 thing. This has kind of gone by the wayside. There are still a few, fully raw Christina being the main one, the biggest one. I think she's close to 1 million subscribers now. Yeah, I don't think there are any other raw vegans that come even close to that. It is a problem, and you know, it's not surprising that the worst recommendations come from like raw foodists, right? Not only is she recommending that you eat lots of fruit and don't worry about protein and get lots of sun, she never mentions sunscreen or anything, but also don't worry about B12. Yeah, it's not really that surprising. I guess that's it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Again, I apologize for all of the sounds. Yeah, comments and questions down below. If you want to subscribe, that's super cool. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. That's a perfect time to stop. Okay.